It starts quietly, not with clocks ticking, but with a feeling that something inside you hasn't kept up with the world outside. The calendar changes, the seasons shift, yet a part of you still lives in another moment. You wake, you move, you speak, but beneath it all, there's a strange sense that time has folded in on itself. We like to think time moves forward, that every second carries us further away from what's behind us. But what if that's not true? What if time isn't a straight line, but a loop we walk in circles through, carrying everything we once felt, everything we once were? Psychologists say your brain doesn't remember events, it remembers emotions. That means when you think of something from years ago, your body doesn't know it's over. It reacts the same way it did back then. Your heart speeds up, your stomach tightens, your breath changes. To your nervous system, the past isn't gone. It's right here. And that's the illusion. We think we're living in the present, but most of us are just revisiting emotional time, the echo of what once mattered. It's why you still think about the person who hurt you. It's why old regrets still burn, and why sometimes the present feels heavy, even when nothing is wrong. But here's the quiet truth. Time doesn't move. We do. And the more we chase the future, or run from the past, the further we drift from the stillness of the now. Maybe peace isn't found in escaping time, but in stepping outside of it. The illusion of linear time. We're taught to think of time as something measurable, seconds, minutes, hours, neat little boxes we can stack and count. But our minds don't live by numbers, they live by experiences. And experiences don't follow a straight line. They spiral, they overlap, they blur. When you think about something that happened years ago, your brain doesn't open a tidy file labeled past. It relives it. Neural pathways light up in the same pattern as when it first occurred. Your body floods with the same hormones: cortisol, adrenaline, even oxytocin, if the memory was sweet. You are no longer remembering, you are re-experiencing. This is why heartbreak never truly fades in a predictable way. You can't put it on a timeline. One day you feel fine. The next, a song, a smell, or a face in a crowd tears open a memory like it happened yesterday. That's not regression. That's how time works inside you. It loops back to unfinished emotions, moments that still seek resolution, and yet we keep trying to live as if time moves neatly forward. We create routines, calendars, deadlines, scaffolds to hold on to meaning. We tell ourselves that the past is gone, that the future is waiting, that progress is linear. But every part of human psychology, from memory formation to emotional development, suggests otherwise. Consider the way dreams blend moments from years apart. You might be sitting in your childhood home, speaking to someone you met last month, while holding an object that doesn't exist. Your mind doesn't care about chronology, it cares about connection. It merges fragments that share the same emotional frequency, regardless of when they occurred. That's how trauma, nostalgia, and longing live, not in time, but in resonance. When you grieve, for example, you don't just mourn the loss itself. You mourn every version of yourself connected to it. The self that hoped, the self that trusted, the self that believed they had more time. And all of those selves exist simultaneously in the psyche. They visit you in quiet moments, in déjà vu, in sudden waves of melancholy that seem to come from nowhere. Philosophers have tried to articulate this for centuries. Einstein once said that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. But long before physics confirmed it, mystics already intuited it, that what we call time is simply the way consciousness experiences change. And consciousness is not bound by clocks. It stretches, contracts, even pauses entirely when emotion or awareness demands it. Think about the way moments of danger feel eternal: a near accident, a confrontation, a heartbreak. Seconds expand into hours inside your perception. Your brain moves into hyper-awareness, trying to capture every detail, every microsecond, to preserve you. And then, in contrast, there are moments of peace, sitting by a window, watching the rain, where hours vanish in what feels like minutes. That's not just poetry, that's neuroscience. Your sense of time is elastic, stretching and shrinking to fit the intensity of what you feel. When you begin to see this clearly, you start realizing how arbitrary our obsession with time really is. We rush to meet deadlines, to grow up, to move on, as though we're in a race against something external. But the only real opponent is perception itself. You can't lose time, you can only lose presence. And presence, ironically, begins when you stop measuring. Modern psychology often refers to something called flow state. It's that sense of timeless immersion that artists, athletes, and creators describe. The moment when you're no longer aware of yourself as separate from what you're doing. When the music seems to play itself through you. When the words write themselves. When you are not the observer, but the process. In those moments, time doesn't exist because the self dissolves. And without a self, there is no before or after. There is only being. And that might be the truest nature of existence. Not a sequence of ticking seconds, but a continuous unfolding of awareness. A dream we're collectively having, where everything, the past, the future, the endless now, coexists in one shimmering field of perception. Every thought, every heartbeat, every flicker of memory is simply another wave in the same ocean. And maybe what we call time is just the movement of those waves. Nothing more than consciousness remembering itself again and again. But this realization comes with a strange kind of peace. Because if time isn't linear, then maybe nothing is ever truly lost. Every version of you, the child who once looked at the sky in wonder, the heartbroken self who thought they'd never heal, the wiser self who listens now in stillness, they're all still here. Not as ghosts, but as threads in the same tapestry. You are not moving through time. Time is moving through you. And when you finally stop chasing it, when you stop treating the past as a prison and the future as a promise, you find something extraordinary: stillness. The awareness that every breath, every pause, every heartbeat is eternity in motion. And that eternity has always been right where you are, waiting for you to notice. Time doesn't just exist outside of you. It lives inside your mind, bending and reshaping itself with every thought, every feeling, every memory that passes through. There is the time your body follows, the turning of the earth, the rise and fall of the sun, the slow aging of cells. And then there is the time your mind creates, the strange fluid rhythm of memory and emotion, where moments from years ago can feel closer than something that happened this morning. This is emotional time, and it's the one that truly defines how you experience life. Think about the last time you waited for something you really wanted. Maybe a message from someone you love, a response that mattered, a result that could change something in you. Every minute felt like an hour, didn't it? Your heart raced, your focus narrowed, your body tensed. The seconds stretched, not because the clock slowed, but because your mind magnified the anticipation. You were living inside a kind of emotional gravity, time warped by meaning. And then, when the message finally came, everything sped up again. Relief dissolved the tension, and time flowed normally once more. This constant stretching and collapsing of time is something you experience every day, yet rarely notice. Now think about the opposite, the moments that disappear too fast. A night spent laughing until your stomach hurt. A conversation that felt effortless, where words and silence blended like a rhythm you didn't have to think about. You look up, and somehow hours have passed. You say things like, "Where did the time go?" But time didn't go anywhere. You simply stopped tracking it because your mind was aligned with the present. When emotion and attention move together, the illusion of linear time dissolves. You enter flow, that timeless current where you stop existing as a separate observer and simply become part of what's unfolding. This is why nostalgia hurts and comforts at the same time. When you look back at a memory, you don't just see it, you feel it. Your brain doesn't store the past like a file. It reconstructs it, moment by moment, through sensation. When you miss someone, you're not yearning for the calendar date. You're yearning for the emotional time you shared with them. You want to feel again what you felt then. Safety, excitement, love, belonging. That's what makes memory so powerful. It's not a record, it's a re-entry. Every time you recall something, your neurons replay the pattern, and for that instant, you step back inside that moment. You're both then and now, past and present intertwined. There's a strange beauty in realizing that your mind never truly leaves the moments that shaped you. The child you were, the teenager who dreamed, the adult who tried, all of them still exist, moving in loops within your awareness. Time inside the human psyche isn't a straight road but a spiral, circling back through memories, emotions, and realizations. Sometimes the spiral feels like progress, other times like repetition, but both are just different ways of learning. When you revisit an old pain, it's not regression. It's your mind giving you another chance to understand it, to see it from a new level of awareness. Healing, after all, is just time folding back on itself until the emotion finally integrates. Science has a term for part of this: mental time travel. It's the brain's ability to project itself into the past or the future, something no other species can do with the same complexity. It's what allows you to plan, to reflect, to imagine. But it's also what makes you suffer, because the same ability that lets you revisit joy lets you relive pain. You can be sitting perfectly still in a quiet room, and yet your mind is decades away, replaying a conversation you wish had gone differently, or anticipating one that hasn't even happened yet. You're physically present, but emotionally displaced. The body lives here, but the mind is wandering through illusions of before and after. That's why mindfulness and meditation are not just spiritual practices. They're ways of returning from emotional time to physical time. They anchor you in the only moment that ever truly exists, the one unfolding right now. When you breathe consciously, you're not just calming yourself, you're syncing the timelines of your being. The past and the future dissolve into rhythm. The heartbeat becomes a metronome of presence. In that state, you realize that peace was never about escaping time, but about remembering that time itself was never real to begin with. Every culture has tried to capture this paradox in its own way. The Greeks had two words for time: chronos, the measurable, ticking kind, and kairos, the felt kind, the time of significance. Chronos is the hour hand, the deadlines, the passing of years. Kairos is the kiss, the realization, the silence that feels infinite. Most of life is lived in chronos, but the moments that change you happen in kairos. They don't take time, they are time. They suspend everything else and remind you that existence is deeper than measurement. If you've ever fallen in love, you've experienced Kairos. If you've ever watched a sunset and felt tears rise without knowing why, that's Kairos too. It's what happens when awareness and emotion merge into one, when you stop counting and start feeling. In that instant, you're outside the illusion of time entirely. The self, which is built on memory and expectation, disappears. Only consciousness remains, untouched by past or future. That's why moments of awe feel eternal, because in them, you touch something that doesn't move. And maybe that's the truth behind the illusion. You can never lose time because there's nothing to lose. Every experience you've ever had still exists as vibration within the infinite present. The only difference is where your attention lands. When you stop clinging to the idea of before and after, you realize that everything you've ever been and everything you'll ever become are happening simultaneously, layered inside the same eternal now. You are not a traveler moving through time. You are the field in which time unfolds. The observer, the memory, the emotion, all of it exists inside you, not outside. Time is not something you pass through. It's something you create, moment by moment, every time you choose where to place your awareness. And when you finally understand that, the race ends. The panic quiets. The fear of running out of time melts away. Because how can you run out of something that never existed? That's the paradox. You only start truly living when you stop believing in time. Everything you've ever sought, peace, understanding, meaning, was never in the future. It was always here, hidden beneath the illusion of movement. The moment you stop chasing it, you find it waiting, still and endless, exactly where it's always been. Inside you. Time is not just something you perceive, it's something your brain builds moment by moment, like an architect constructing reality from fragments of experience. It doesn't flow the way a river flows outside of you. Instead, it's pieced together from sensations, memories, and expectations that your mind stitches into a coherent story. This story feels smooth and continuous, but underneath, it's broken, fragmented, and constantly rewritten. Every second of awareness is actually a reconstruction, a delicate illusion of continuity created by billions of neurons firing in patterns shaped by your attention. Your brain doesn't see the world in real time. There's a delay, a small but measurable pause, about a few hundred milliseconds, between what happens and when you become aware of it. That means you're always living slightly in the past, always seeing a memory rather than a live feed. Yet the brain edits this delay out, smoothing the footage like a film editor so it feels seamless. Imagine how disorienting it would be to constantly notice the gap between now and perception. So your brain hides it from you, giving you the illusion of a perfect present moment. The truth is, what you call now is already gone by the time you notice it. But it gets stranger. The mind doesn't just replay what has happened. It also predicts what will happen next, filling in blanks before reality even arrives. Every time you look at something, your brain guesses what it expects to see based on the past, then updates that guess when new information comes in. This predictive mechanism is why habits feel like time loops. Your mind keeps replaying what it knows, expecting the same outcomes, living inside a script it already wrote. The more familiar your life becomes, the less actual time you experience. That's why childhood feels longer than adulthood. When everything is new, the brain records more data, and time feels full. When things become repetitive, it compresses. Days blur together because the brain stops paying attention to details it already recognizes. There's a haunting beauty to this. Your sense of time isn't shaped by clocks, but by novelty, meaning, and awareness. The more alive you are to each moment, the slower time feels. The more automated your life becomes, the faster it passes. This means that time speeding up as you age isn't just a poetic idea. It's neuroscience. Your brain literally stops noticing things it's seen too many times. The days are shorter, not because they are, but because you're no longer truly seeing them. You live through assumptions, not sensations. So, if you want to stretch time again, you have to return to presence, to surprise the brain, to step into moments as if they've never happened before. That's why travel feels expansive. It's why heartbreak feels endless. It's why falling in love feels eternal. In those moments, everything becomes vivid again. The brain wakes up, recording every detail. The sound of a voice, the curve of a smile, the temperature of the air. It collects so much information that a single day can feel like a lifetime. That's not fantasy. That's perception, unfiltered by routine. Now, consider the paradox of memory. Your brain doesn't store time in a line. It stores it in layers. When you recall something, you're not pulling up a file from the past. You're re-experiencing it in the present, activating the same neural pathways as when it first occurred. That's why a smell, a sound, or a place can instantly transport you years back. It's not nostalgia, it's time folding. In that instant, the past isn't something you think about. It's something you inhabit again. For that split second, the boundaries of time dissolve completely. This also means that your sense of self is built on a constantly changing memory. You're not the same person who experienced those moments. You're the one who remembers them now. Each recollection subtly rewrites the original experience. Every time you remember, you edit. Every time you reflect, you alter. Over a lifetime, your identity becomes an evolving story told by the part of you that exists now. The person you were 10 years ago is a character in your current mind's narrative. Familiar, yes, but rewritten every time you think of them. Philosophers like Augustine noticed this centuries ago. He said that time doesn't truly exist except in the mind, the past as memory, the future as anticipation, and the present as attention. Everything else is abstraction. That's why even the smallest shifts in attention can distort your experience of life. When you're bored, attention slows. You feel every second. When you're anxious, attention races. Time slips through your fingers. The passage of time is really the movement of awareness across your inner landscape. And maybe that's the quiet beauty of realizing time was never really moving. Only you were. Every breath, every memory, every thought just folds back into the same stillness you've always been part of. When you slow down enough to see it, everything feels softer. The rush fades. You're no longer trying to chase the future or fix the past. You're just here, resting in the calm between moments. If this made you think, or maybe just helped you unwind a little, take a second to breathe and let it settle. And if you're still awake or about to drift off, don't forget to leave a comment letting us know where in the world you're listening from. It's always something special, seeing how far these quiet moments reach. If you'd like to join us for more reflections like this, where psychology, philosophy, and calm all meet, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay kind, and take your time. It's all you ever really have.